Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. I know that many of you out there are from the City of Maplewood and that you appreciate the fact that we do cover Maplewood issues of interest that may not necessarily come through during the Maplewood City Council meetings. And for those of you who don't live in Maplewood, many of the ideas and issues that we talk about regarding Maplewood apply actually to other communities as well, because they're oftentimes the same issues that are being faced, the same discussions that are being had. It's just another way of looking at the same issues over and over and over again. The first thing that I want to talk about is that in Maplewood, most of our residents probably have seen their city news, their Maplewood Monthly. And in the February Maplewood Monthly, it talks about the fact that there is a new task force that is being formed that is for looking at and developing an overall vision for our park system. Now keep in mind, we do have a Parks Commission that has been in place, well, as long as I can remember, and even before that. And so you see the Parks Commission plays a very vital role within our community, and on this new task force, they will have, I believe, 2 members of the Parks Commission on the new Parks Task Force. But there's also going to be other people that will be on this new Parks Task Force for looking at the overall vision and future of the park system. There's a call out for citizens to apply to this task force, and they can apply to be on the task force through the end of February. So today our live program is February 20th, 2013. So you still have a number of days yet to get your application in. There's also room and opportunity on the task force for people who are part of the Maplewood business community, and also there's some positions open for elected officials. So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to get a hold of Maplewood. You can call their information line at 651-249-2000. And they will be able to help you get an application, or you can go online and you can find the application there. Now, why is it important to watch what this task force is doing? Well, because you see there's many things coming up with regard to the Maplewood Park system that are of critical interest to citizens, particularly those who want to preserve our parks and our open spaces and don't believe that Maplewood should be selling any of them. Because you see, I believe that this task force, part of their duty is going to be to look at the overall system and then to prioritize the parks and the areas that we have for our neighborhood preserves. And with prioritization may come the determination of which ones to obviously to invest additional money into, but again, that's what the Parks Commission does. Or maybe to decide that there are certain parks and green areas that aren't necessarily needed for our community, so maybe the best thing to do is to sell them. Currently, I believe that the votes on the Parks Commission are not in favor of selling any of our parks, and so perhaps this is part of the reason why there is a competing task force that has been created, because then they can get a second opinion. Moving on to another topic in Maplewood, there's been, through the last couple of years, a lot of discussion about whether or not citizens should be able to speak during the City Council meeting on issues that are not on the agenda. Now, for most of the communities out in our viewing area, almost all of their council agendas have a place on the City Council agenda where citizens can come forward and can talk about something to their council members, talk to them about an issue that is not on the agenda. Now, in many communities, it's up near the beginning of the meeting. Some communities, it's near the end of the meeting. Now, Maplewood has experimented with all kinds of opportunities for citizens to be able to address their council. For many, many years, prior to 2005, approximately in November of 2005, prior to that time, Maplewood always had their citizen comment period at the end of the meeting, at the very tail end, like 11 o'clock at night. So there really wasn't very many citizens that actually came to the council to speak, because by that time most of them had gone home, or that they never went there to start with because it got to be too late. Then in approximately November 2005, that was changed because they saw that the handwriting was on the wall. There was a new council coming in, so they changed the visitor presentations, is what's called in Maplewood, the citizen comment, to be near the beginning of the meeting. And so that's the way it was for, I'd say, I think about 4 years, maybe a little over 4 years. And then in about 2010, it changed, in that it was changed and put back to the end of the meeting and then eliminated altogether. And so then it was replaced with a listening session to be held prior to the council meeting, that is not televised, that nobody knows about, and few people go to. And we have now, again, a change in the council. So we have a couple of council members who are working towards moving citizen comment back into the council meetings, and not only back into the council meetings, and integrating citizen comments into the council's agenda, but also having it at the beginning of the meeting. And those two council members is Council Member Rebecca Cave and Bob Cardinal. Now, ironically, last year, Bob Cardinal and Marv Copen were the two council members who were trying to reintegrate visitor presentations and to have it as part of that council meeting. But they were unsuccessful. The vote back then was 3-2. Kathy Juniman, Councilmember Kathy Juniman, Mayor Rosbach, and Councilmember Lanis back then voted to keep visitor citizen comments out of the council meeting and not part of the council agenda. And Bob Cardinal and Marv Copen voted to keep citizen comments integrated as part of the council business. Now we have this year, beginning of this year, 2013 in January, where Bob Cardinal again was supporting the idea of having citizen comments integrated into the council meeting. Rebecca Cave was right there with him as part of one of the council members supporting this initiative. And guess who backed out? Marv Copen. Now, I understand that we have a caller on the line. Caller, thank you for calling in. Questions or comments for us this evening?
The question I have is about this idea of having, allowing citizens and residents to express their opinion at city council meetings. As many state representatives continue to tell us, and I think everyone in high school has learned this, it's all about listening. It's all about elected representatives listening. In the end, that is the most important principle of government, whether you're the government at the city council or at the government at a higher level. And I'm kind of curious, this idea that you cannot express your opinion in Maplewood, and then you hear other people talk about how they've had bad experiences when they talk to representatives like Rosbach or Juniman. My question is, how do people take it in their hands to correct that and bring and revolve the dial once again? So it's about listening, and the council cares about listening, and they care about listening to people's opinions. and allow people to express their opinion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those questions. I will say that the last council meeting to have a citizen comment or visitor presentations as part of that city council agenda, the last one, I actually happen to have been at that meeting for a different reason. But I got up and I spoke in favor of keeping citizen comments, the visitor presentation, integrated into the meeting, because it allows other citizens in the community to hear what not only is some maybe concerns going on from those citizens' perspective, but as you mentioned, something very critical, their opinions about something that's not on the agenda. You see, it's very difficult to have citizens be engaged and in participating in creating the public policy of their community if you don't give them an opportunity to voice their opinions. That is actually the basis of creating public policy within your community, is by being able to talk about opinions, to talk about issues, to say, well, if we do this, then here's a consequence. If we do this, this is a consequence. Like, for instance, what is the consequence of shutting 40% of Maplewood's fire stations prematurely before there's a plan in place to provide the public safety, the fire protection, and the ability to provide ambulance service from those closed fire stations? What is that consequence? And yet, this is something that people cannot come to the council meeting and talk about as a public forum, as part of that council meeting to address all their council members, because there is no forum for it. At this listening session, sometimes there's only one of the council persons there. Sometimes there might be 3 if you're lucky, but there's certainly the guarantee that there will never be 5, because you see, there are at least 1 or 2 council members throughout this time that they've had this listening session, which is untelevised, which is not part of the council meeting, that there have been council members who don't come, they don't want to come, and they plan on never coming. And so how can you say that you believe in citizen engagement if you don't facilitate it in a way that's meaningful, not only for the participants, but also for the listeners? And the listeners are not always the elected officials, but the people within the community. That's how the people at home know what's going on in other citizens' minds, is by watching what's going on at their council meeting and hearing other citizens make comment. So I think that there's a very important part to having citizen comment, visitor presentations integrated into the council meeting. Another reason why it's also important to have it as part of the council meeting is because then it becomes part of the minutes. And it is also important from a historical standpoint, in that you then know who got up to speak and what was the issue they were speaking on. I've been doing some research on a couple of different topics, looking back at old minutes, actually from 2003, 2004, 2005. And it's very fascinating because you do get an idea and a snapshot of what are some of the citizens' concerns back during that time period, because you can go to the minutes and see who got up to speak during citizen comment, the visitor presentation, and see what was it that they were talking about that was of interest and concern to them. And one thing that I found out that was very fascinating is that we had a gentleman in our community, many of you may remember him, Emo Sturzenegger. You know, he got up several times during visitor presentations and was talking about why he thought Maplewood should have a ward system. Now, what was he talking about? Well, he thought that because of Maplewood's size and the way that it's shaped and the difference in demographics of from South Maplewood to West Maplewood, and there's a lot of variety within Maplewood, he thought it would be good for Maplewood to be divided up into wards so that each of those wards elected their own representative, so that the people of the South Lake could say, so-and-so is our elected official, our city council person. The people of Parkside could say, so-and-so is our city council person. The people up by the mall, they could say, you know what, so-and-so is our elected official. Now, what would be the benefits of having a ward system that Emil Sturzenegger talked about at visitor presentations back in 2003, 4, 5? What's the benefit of that? Well, because then those elected officials, they're more likely, they're looking at the overall benefit for the whole of Maplewood, but they're also interested in serving the best needs of their neighbors. And here's why it's important. If we would have had a ward system, do you think the fire station in the South Leg and the fire station in Parkside, 40% of our fire stations, do you think that they would have been closed prematurely? Or do you think there would have been some discussion on the council? There would have been a little fight for their neighbors and saying, we need a fire station that is active and running in South Maplewood. Do you think that maybe there would have been a different outcome? You know, that's why it's important to have visitor presentation and citizen comments to be part of that city council meeting, because then it's in the minutes and then it is preserved so that people who come along later will know about the issues and they haven't lost those opinions. Now, we have some film footage here from a recent city council meeting. We have Rebecca Cave, Councilmember Rebecca Cave, coming on board talking about why we should put visitor presentations back in the agenda, back on the business of the City Council. Let's take a look.
We're talking about visitor presentations.
Sure. I just wanted, I was one of the persons who put it in. I wanted it like where F was at visitor presentations. I'd also, you know, it was also suggested that they begin at 6:30 p.m. if we have them on the agenda right after approval of minutes. But I just think it should just be in with the meeting.
Okay. Well, somebody will have to make a motion to do something. I mean, I don't want to change what we're doing.
I'll make a motion.
But, well, you can wait till I'm done talking now. Okay. In that the main people that come are the people who are tied to their cable TV shows, which blast the city and the city council, and they come for that reason, to try to cause trouble. And so if you're voting for visitor presentations, I can guarantee who will come and our time will be wasted. So, were you going to make a motion, Mr. Cardinal?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'll make a motion that we, could we have a little discussion? Maybe I'll postpone my motion.
No, make a motion, then we'll have discussion.
Okay. All right. First, I'll state I don't think we should go to the 6:30. We have our workshops, and they dig into that hour, so I don't think we're rushing everything. So I think we should move visitor presentations at the pleasure of the council to after approval of minutes or after award of bids.
Pick one or the other.
Okay, after approval of minutes.
And I'll second that for putting it on the agenda, letter F.
I think it's very offensive to the residents and the citizens of Maplewood that we don't have any kind of visitor presentation during the council meeting.
Which ones have complained to you, Mr. Cardinal?
I'm just saying anyone.
See, so nobody.
I'm saying to the residents, to the citizens of Maplewood,
And which
not
ones
to
have
be given the
complained to
opportunity.
you, Mr. Cardinal?
I'm not gonna,
Now, that was Bob Cardinal, and he is expressing his opinion about wanting to put visitor presentation, citizen comment back on the agenda. But you see how Mayor Rossbach wants to intimidate him and say, well, who's complained to you? Who wants it on there? Come, tell us who's complained to you. Well, isn't that sort of an intimidation tactic? Telling another council person, you know what, why don't you squeal on the citizens who told you that they want to have it back on the agenda? Why should Bob Cardinal have to disclose the names of the people who have told him they would like to have visitor presentations back on the agenda? Because you see, if their name is read out loud at the council meeting, they may be subject to, well, imagine, listen to the dialogue, and you consider what they might be subject to. Let's continue on.
I'm just saying it's very offensive that we don't have an open forum that people can come.
You do have. It's before the meeting.
That's not open, Mayor.
It's more open than the other one is. It's not restricted. Ms. Cave.
Well, and in keeping with freedom of speech and putting it on the agenda, I think we have to think about that. And having this on the agenda is where it should be. And you can have it as restrictive as you want. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Call the question.
Yes, Ms. Gentleman.
Call the question.
Oh, I thought you said you had.
So anyway, so there you go. And this idea about freedom of speech. Now, you heard the caller earlier talking about an opportunity to express your opinion. What is it about citizens expressing their opinion that drives some elected officials, quite frankly, drives them to the hills and thinking about how can they squelch their freedom of speech and their opinions? Now, it's interesting is that in a couple of weekends from now, I will be giving a speech, a little talk, at an organizational meeting of critical thinkers. Now, on this program, I have had some guests who have come on the program that were people that I met at the Critical Thinkers Club. And the Critical Thinkers Club is a group of people. We get together once a month on Sunday, one Sunday a month, and somebody from the group gets up and gives a little speech. Well, my speech is going to be about citizen engagement and talking about the use of citizen engagement as a way to create public policy. Now, this idea, while it's not a new idea, and if you listen to all kinds of politicians talk out there, they all say that they want to engage citizen participation in the creation of public policy. And yet there are so many roadblocks that they put in the way to actually squelch that participation, to squelch that expression of opinion. Because once you have citizens feeling like they are empowered to give their opinions, to create public policy, to actually criticize some of their elected officials or all of their elected officials, suddenly democracy gets messy. And suddenly we might have to do some more things that we didn't figure out that we had to do. So it's very fascinating that you see eliminating visitor presentations, the citizen comment from the meetings, is actually a method by which to limit citizen participation and citizen engagement. Myself personally, I believe visitor presentations should be in the front of the meeting. When I was mayor, there was quite a long period of time that actually we had it starting at 6:30. it was a regular council meeting, started at 7, but we had it on camera. And that, you know, people came and they had, generally, they didn't really have much more to say than 5 minutes worth of information that they wanted to express. Not everybody was positive. Not everybody was negative. Some people had announcements they wanted to make to the community. You see, this is another reason why you might want to have citizen comment integrated into your council meeting, because then citizens can come and actually announce something that maybe their Boy Scout group is doing, and it's then publicized to everybody who's watching the council meeting. Now, isn't that community friendly? Isn't that what we're supposed to be about? So let's continue on with our film footage.
I'm sorry. No,
all right, we have a motion that's been made by Mr. Cardinal, seconded by Ms. Cave, and it would be to move visitor presentations after approval of the minutes or item F on the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
It's 3-2, motion fails.
So anyway, so there you heard the vote. And as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, now last year, Marv Copen, he voted with Bob Cardinal to keep visitor presentations integrated as part of the city council meeting. Now, he's changed sides. Maybe it has to do with him changing where he sits on the council. You know, they changed his seating. They put him between Mayor Rosbach and Councilmember Juniman. And one can only wonder why they changed his seating. I don't know. I've got some ideas I've speculated about previously. I think it's so they could kick him underneath the desk to keep him in line. And so obviously he had voted with them rather than voting with Bob Cardinal as he did the time before. And, well, you know, it is what it is. So let's take a look at our next clip. We'll
pay any differently for our insurance than any other city that is judged to be an average insurance risk. And of course, it's through the league. It's not like we have a choice where we can go out and just buy it from State Farm or something.
So in this particular clip, now they're starting to talk about the insurance coverage that the City of Maplewood has. And like all cities, pretty much, except for those that are self-insured, Maplewood has their municipal insurance through the League of Minnesota Cities Trust. And that's very standard and customary because, as you heard Mayor Rosbach say, it's not like you can just go to State Farm and say, okay, I want to get the insurance for my municipality. And so they pretty much have a corner on the market. As a result of that, they also pretty much have a say in what cities do with regard to their litigation, because they are the litigation managers of the litigation that any city may have that they have to defend against or that they may engage in, because obviously a city could be on either end of the litigation. They could be the one that's being sued, or they could be the one that is suing. So it just kind of depends. But obviously, if the city is the one doing the suing, then the League of Cities Trust doesn't have anything to really talk about with regard to their litigation, from what I understand. It's interesting is that there are several larger cities in the state of Minnesota that are self-insured. And what does that mean? It means that if somebody sues them, they don't have insurance that they've purchased, but what they do is that they defend it themselves, and whatever payouts there are, they pay for themselves. And so larger cities such as, I believe, Minneapolis and St. Paul are self-insured. A city like Maplewood, Roseville, Shoreview, Vadnais Heights, City of Grant, they are not self-insured. So let's continue on with our film footage.
To their policies during the year, but it affects everybody equally based on population and that type of thing. You have another question, Mr. Cardinal?
Yes, Mayor, thanks. So is the premium decided by the population? Is that how they?
Well, Mayor, it all depends. like our workers' comp insurance is based upon a rating, experience rating. The liability is, I believe that's population based. Property is has a factoring of what is insured, and so it's not strictly on a population base.
Go by value.
By value and this type of thing, and so there isn't just one pat answer to your question, because there are many different kinds of insurance that we have, and there are other options that are available, such as open meeting insurance and stuff that we haven't taken advantage of or don't see the necessary need for that. And so about the best we can say is workers' comp is based upon the experience factor. The general liability is more based on population, and the property casualty is based upon the value and somewhat experience rating too. You know, if you have your automobiles, police cars have a number of crashes and stuff, that does have an impact.
Now that was City Manager James Antonin, and yeah, at first I kind of got the feeling that he was searching for words, trying to figure out how to describe this to the City Council. But as the City Manager, he obviously would be, or should be, very well versed in exactly how it does work. He, of course, is not unfamiliar with the League of Minnesota Cities Trust, because I understand at one point he had been actually on the board of directors. So who better to be able to give an explanation of how they do their insurance rating. Now, it's also my understanding that with a municipality's workers' comp insurance, that they also look at certainly the number of on-the-job accidents that there have been, but also the kind of risk management that is in place in the workforce and in the workplace. And so there are seminars that they actually put on that they encourage the municipalities to send members of their staff to. A lot of what is being discussed isn't anything having to do with what the agenda item is. Now, some folks might say, well, why are they doing all these discussions about all these other things when it says on the screen that it's supposed to be a discussion about whether or not they should put out a request for proposals for looking at the legal contract for the civil contract and for the prosecution. Well, you see, I think Councilmember Cardinal, he put something on the agenda where he wanted to talk about this RFP issue, the request for proposals, and whether or not it's something the city should engage in. However, once they started talking about the topic, he actually had other issues that he wanted to discuss. He had a different agenda than what was actually the motion, or not the motion, but the topic that he placed on the agenda. So it's very fascinating. So we'll see how this all unfolds as we go through our video. So let's look at our next video clip.
And I'm certainly not going to be one asking for raises when everyone else isn't getting them. So I really appreciate being here, and that's why I've kept the cost flat. That was a commitment that I made back when I took the job, and I've pretty much stuck with it.
Yes, Mr. Cardinal.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to reflect a little bit. Of course, our city attorney, and I have nothing, no axe to grind here at all. I'm just, we're in review here. And so when I see some of the numbers here, it's nice to have a little footnote at the bottom, but you have to add these numbers of the HR to those numbers to get the big number that's up there for the first few years of 2000s. And also, we might not, the city attorney might not have been involved in handling those lawsuits. Is that what you're saying, Mayor?
Not.
No, he hasn't been involved in handling those lawsuits.
No.
That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
But we ended up with some lawsuits.
Excuse me?
The city attorney wasn't involved in handling those lawsuits. Is that what you're saying?
Yes?
But we ended up with some lawsuits.
And where are you going, Bob?
Well, we had lawsuits.
Yes?
And you're saying the city attorney was not involved in handling those lawsuits. I can understand that.
Yeah?
But we ended up with lawsuits.
Which means what?
Which means that we shouldn't end up with lawsuits.
Well, then we shouldn't either enforce our ordinances or...
Let's talk about what's going on there, because the agenda item clearly is about talking about whether or not the city council should ask for the city manager to put out a request for proposals to find out if there's better prices for either the city attorney for civil litigation matters or for prosecution. Now, I happen to have, and this is part of the agenda, and so this is all public data, but here is a list of the prices that Maplewood has paid for a combination of their civil with their prosecution contracts. And currently, the city of Maplewood uses one attorney's law firm to cover both civil and prosecution. Now, that's not unusual. Many cities do it that way. Some cities split them out and have civil being taken care of by one law firm and having prosecution done by another law firm. So it just kind of depends on the city and how it's done that way. But for instance, with Maplewood, in 2012, if you combine the civil and the prosecution contracts together, the total legal costs was these are approximate numbers I'll give you, $207,000. In 2011, it was $208,000. In 2010, it was $203,000. In 2009, it was about $203,000. Again, you go back to 2008. Now, keep in mind, these years are the years when I was mayor. It was $202,000, and in 2007, it was again about the $200,000. And then, if you take a look, though, in 2006 is when we had a change of from one law firm taking care of both contracts to the current law firm. And in 2006, it was approximately $279,000. And so before that, it was $300,000. That was in 2005. In 2004, $318,000. So when you start looking at the numbers, Maplewood's contract services for civil and prosecution have gone substantially down, and from what you hear from the majority of the council, they feel that the services are very good and that they're perfectly happy with what they have. And I don't see any reason that the citizens should be complaining. But we don't know yet, why is it that Councilmember Cardinal is complaining?
I'm just looking in review here.
Yeah, but we're not reviewing that, Bob. We're reviewing the city attorney's position.
Yes, that's correct.
And so we shouldn't be venturing off into like a discussion about why we had a number of different lawsuits when they don't, I mean, it's fine to talk about, but it's not germane to the topic.
Well, it is germane.
Tell me how.
Have we had any lawsuits since Marv and I left in 2005?
Of course we have.
Okay. So, did we have lawsuits prior to that?
Yes.
Okay. Is this all reflected here? I mean, I don't see those. I don't see the lawsuits that occurred prior to 2006.
I don't think they put them in there.
Councilmember Bob Cardinal Now keep in mind, he was mayor for 6 years, from 1999 to January 1st or 2nd of 2006. So he was mayor for 6 years, and he's asking these questions. Well, did we have lawsuits when Marv and I were here? Well, of course he did. How could he forget the police brutality lawsuits? Oh, my goodness. How could he forget those? How could he forget the compost site lawsuits and oh, my goodness, and the problems that were created with all of that? And I know that there were plenty of other lawsuits as well that are too numerous to mention. But there he is sitting, pretending like the rest of us don't remember anything. But you know what? I bet you can go back into those city council minutes and you can find all kinds of evidence about other kinds of lawsuits that happened when Bob Cardinal was mayor and Marv Copen was on the council. So anyway, let's continue on.
Yeah, but we're not reviewing that, Bob. We're reviewing the city attorney's position.
Yes, that's correct.
And so we shouldn't be venturing off into like a discussion about why we had a number of different lawsuits when they don't, I mean, that's fine to talk about, but it's not germane to the topic.
Well, it is germane.
Tell me how.
Have we had any lawsuits since Marv and I left in 2005?
Of course we have.
Okay. So, did we have lawsuits prior to that?
Yes.
Okay. Is this all reflected here? I mean, I don't see the lawsuits that occurred prior to 2006.
I don't think they put them in there. I think they started.
Yeah, and I did ask for 2006 and beyond.
Okay.
All I'm saying, Mayor, is there some lawsuits that occurred, and it certainly wasn't the city attorney's fault on all those. I can recognize that. But what we don't want is lawsuits. We don't want lawsuits.
Okay, I think everybody can agree with that, Mr.
Okay.
Cardinal.
Well,
what does that have to do with our discussion?
I just asked the question, Mayor, if we had some lawsuits.
Yes, and my question is, what does that have to do with our discussion? If you can tie that to the discussion about the city attorney's position, then please do so. Otherwise, let's talk about what it is we're here for.
Well, I'm seeing some lawsuits here, and I don't know how you resolve them. I think it's...
They are resolved.
Yeah, they are. I'm just looking to review.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I do have a list here of a couple of lawsuits that I guess he's all concerned about. Well, certainly here's one lawsuit that I think that actually we've got a big fundraiser that we're celebrating the outcome of that lawsuit. That lawsuit was back in 2007 or so, the denial of the housing development, the CUP, for Copar. Now, do you remember that particular lawsuit back in 2007? This developer bought the property down there at Fish Creek, 72 acres or so, and they bought it knowing that it was zoned for low-density housing, and yet they had a big plan. They were going to put 6 units per acre on the Fish Creek property. They were going to build right up through that bluff line, and guess what? There was a city council back in 2007 that said, you know, that's inconsistent with how the land is guided, inconsistent with our comprehensive plan, and we're not going to approve your conditional use permit. Even past Mayor George Rossbach called a conditional use permit a license to steal. Well, back in 2007, there was a council that said Fish Creek property is worth preserving so that way it's not high-density housing of 6 units per acre. And there were 3 people that voted no for that CUP, and that was Rebecca Cave, Eric Jelly, and yours truly, Diana Longrie. Now, the 2 council members who were on the council back then who were aghast that we would even say that we wouldn't approve this conditional use permit for this development, this housing development, was Mr. Rosbach and Miss Juniman. Now, I'm sure that when you go to the fundraiser that we're having here in Maplewood to raise money to buy the Fish Creek area so it can be preserved and preserved in perpetuity, I would be willing to bet that you're going to find Mr. Rosbach at the fundraiser and you're going to find Miss Kathy Juniman at that fundraiser, because now they've changed their tune and now they're on the side of preserving Fish Creek. But keep in mind, that was one of the lawsuits back in 2007 that Mr. Bob Cardinal is grousing about. And with that particular lawsuit, well, the losses incurred as a result of the losses is, you know, again, this is covered by the insurance company, was $116,000, and the deductible paid by the city was approximately $60,000. But look at today, what it is that we have as a result. And you heard Mayor Rosbach say, well, sometimes litigation is a result of enforcing our ordinances. So another lawsuit, though, that they should pay great attention to is one that just recently settled and is a result, again, of actually some actions that certainly were not actions that I condoned, but certainly were actions that I guess if you ever were to listen to the video, or the audio rather, the audio tapes of the closed meetings, that which now that these cases are settled, that the audio of the closed meetings on these particular cases would actually be available for the public to request, because under data practices, once things are settled and resolved, that then, for the most part, all of that then becomes public data. So I am sure that if you were to listen to some of those tapes, the audio, that you would hear Mayor Rosbach actually condoning some of the things that the city staff did that resulted in the refusal to issue a certificate of occupancy to Wipers Recycling, and also with regard to the unreasonable seizure, excessive police force, and false arrests, also having to do with recyclers, Wipers Recycling. And if you were to combine all of those cases combined and talk about the losses incurred under the insurance, it's close to $2 million. That's $2 million. And the deductibles paid by the City of Maplewood, well, it's approximately $140,000. Now, that's litigation that Mr. Bob Cardinal should be concerned about. That's the litigation he should be asking about, because at a recent listening session, he was saying that we have the police, the finest there is. Now, I will tell you that we have many fine police officers on the Maplewood Police Force. However, somebody was responsible for the excessive force that was exhibited and had to be paid for. So let's take a look at our next video.
As far as other lawsuits go, cities get sued. You know, police vehicles hit other people, they hit vehicles, they get sued, bad things happen. I mean, if you want to talk about litigation claims, if you wanted to do the research and see how often St. Paul and Minneapolis get sued, it's almost daily. So that's just what happens, and it would have happened on anybody's watch at any time, any place, because that's a right that citizens have, and cities are easy targets. That's why you have an insurance pool, which is what you're a part of, and that's why when claims come in, they come into me, and I review them, usually with Mr. Antonin and Mr. All, and then the decision is made whether or not to turn them over to the league for what we call the tender of defense. Most of the time, that's what happens. You know, sometimes to save money, the choice has been made for it to stay in-house with me, which is something I don't have to do, but because the deductible is there and you try to save money where you can defend things in-house. You can not turn it over to the league, and then you take your chances with the lawsuit. But that's typically the way these things go, and the league has done a really good job, I would say, the last 5 years, 6 years. Well, I don't know, like I said, what's on that list, but that's generally how it goes. So you won't be able to stop that, no matter if there's someone like me in this seat or nobody in this seat.
one thing I wanted to bring up, because earlier I had mentioned how some cities use the same law firm for both their civil contract and for the prosecution contract. Well, here's some interesting information to share with you. For instance, if you were to review some of the other cities, and again, this is in the packet from the City Council meeting. If you look at Richfield, Richfield pays approximately, if you were to combine their civil together with their prosecution contracts, they pay close to $300,000, and they use two separate firms, one for civil, one for the prosecution, but again, together combined, nearly $300,000. Currently, Maplewood is, as I mentioned, about $207,000. Another city, let's take a look at Roseville. For my Roseville viewers out there, Roseville uses one firm to handle both the civil and the prosecution, and their total costs come to, imagine, pretty close to $300,000. Okay, now that's an example where they use one law firm, but it's still about $300,000. Okay, so let's take a look at White Bear Lake. Now, FCC Studios here, right in the heart of White Bear Lake. So this is very pertinent to the White Bear Lake viewers. White Bear Lake has separate firms for the civil contract and for the prosecution contract. So they're like Richfield that way. They have two separate firms. But their total comes to about $160,000 for the two combined. Plus, they also pay for additional hours as needed. See, so that could account for, like, say, if something more comes up, then they would have to pay extra over and above that contract. Now, you heard Mr. Cantrude there, the city attorney for Maplewood, that he indicated that there are times where he does additional things that he wouldn't have to do, but that he does because it's just part of that relationship that he has. That's part of the reason why the costs, I think, are kept low, is because he actually he does that. And then let's take a look here at Brooklyn Park. Brooklyn Park, they, like Richfield and White Bear Lake, have separate firms for their prosecution and for their civil. And their costs come to $500,000. So when you take a look at what some of the other cities are doing and the costs that they have with regard to their contracts, well, you know, you can see that Maplewood, for once, isn't on the high end. And it's interesting, too. This was a point that was brought up during the meeting, and Ms. Cave brought this up. She indicated that, when, you know, a request for proposal for your legal services isn't actually something that you put out every year, that generally speaking, most cities, that when they have a contract with their attorney, it might be for 2 years, 3 years. Some cities go with a 5-year contract. Many go with more like in the 2 to 3 year range of what they do before they maybe look somewhere else or whatever. Now, we have not too much time left, but there's another issue that I wanted to touch on briefly, that I encourage people that no matter what community you live in, that, you know, you might find, and you might say, oh, that Diana, that sounds so boring. Why would I want to read that book? But a book that you might want to read in your community is your budget book for your city. Because by reading your budget book for your city, you can find out a lot of things about how your city operates. And you may raise some questions for you as well. Now, some cities, in their budget book, they have set it up so that they have the basic summary budget, and then if you want the supplemental, that's in a separate book that you have to get separately, that gives you the line item detail. Other cities combine them both into their whole book so that way it's all in one place. But I want to share something with you that I found, well, not just recently, but I knew it was in there because it's something that I've been talking about for the last few years. And certainly even my last year as being mayor in 2009, I talked about it because I found out something that to me was quite startling. And I think it's a practice that probably occurs in many communities, but my question is, what is going to be the impact for all of our communities down the road? And it's this. I'm looking in, for instance, in the Maplewood budget book, I'm looking in the section under Public Works, and here's the comments that it has. The engineering program remains a revenue-producing program. The costs of this program are exceeded by the revenue paid to the general fund generated by the entire staff within this program. Well, see, this just gives you a hint because you're thinking to yourself, how can it be revenue producing? Well, you see, cities for their road projects, they do get state aid money for some road projects. They do have some other money coming from other sources. And so that's not from necessarily the property taxes of their residents. And you see, then the rest of us are thinking, well, the rest of it, of course, is paid for by bonding, which is taking out a loan in order to pay for that street. And of course, special assessments, which means the property owners are paying a special assessment, a certain amount that the city has assessed against them for that road project. But you see, what has come down to is that here's a chart that I got back in 2009, that a portion of our road project actually is being done by city staff hours, and then when the bond comes in and the city gets the bond money, they tally up how many hours their city staff has spent on that road project, and then they reimburse the general fund with those dollars coming from the bond, from the loan. And so when it says that it exceeds by the revenue paid, the costs of this program are exceeded by the revenue paid to the general fund generated by the entire staff. You see, you've got money coming in from the bonds, and then the bonds are paid out over 15 years. So a certain percentage of your staff hours are actually being paid for on the 15-year payment plan. Now, is that something that is sustainable for our municipalities in the long run? That's something that I hope to be able to cover in greater depth on a future program of Off the Record News. And we are come to the end of our program, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Off the Record News. If you ever would like to appear on the program, you've got an organization that you're engaged in and you want to get your message out, get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook 24/7. I'm in the phone book, or you can just stop by my office at 1321 Frost Avenue East. And if my little car is parked out front, most likely I'm in the office. Just give a knock on the window and I'll be happy to talk to you. So anyway, until next week, bye-bye. Are you concerned about peace, justice, and jobs? So am I. I'm Diana Longrie, and I invite you to join me. Washington at Work. Is Congress working for you? Washington at Work looks at the issues of peace, justice, and jobs. Join us. Watch Washington at Work.